You know that feeling when you're about to drop serious money on a new PC build and you instinctively start looking at Intel chips because, well, that's just what you do. That's been the default for most of us for years. Intel was the safe bet, the obvious choice. But then you check the latest build guides, browse through a few Reddit threads, maybe watch some benchmark, and something feels different. AMD keeps popping up everywhere. And not as a budget alternative anymore, but as the actual recommendation. And if you're like me, you probably sat there wondering when the hell that happened. Well, it happened gradually, then all at once. I mean, yeah, Intel still sells more processor overall. They still hold around 60% of the global CPU market, but in the world of enthusiast PC builds, the ones where people actually give a damn about performance and value, Intel's grip has loosened significantly. Well, in desktop specifically. AMD now commands a third of the market, up from basically nothing a few years back when Intel was outselling them 9-1. And that's not just market share shifting, that's a fundamental change on how people build computers. And here's the thing about dominance. It doesn't disappear overnight. Intel spent decades as the undisputed king of processors. They had better performance, better efficiency, and the entire ecosystem built around their platform. AMD was always there, sure, but they were the scrappy underdog making cheaper chips for budget builds. That dynamic defined PC building for years. You bought AMD if you were broke.
Look, if you're a broke boy, just say so.
You bought Intel if you wanted the best. That dynamic is dead now, and Intel killed it themselves through combinations of complacency and catastrophic missteps that would be impressive if they weren't so damaging to anyone who brought their recent processors. Let me start with the Raptor Lake disaster because it perfectly encapsulates how badly Intel fumbled. In early 2024, reports started surfacing about Intel's 13th and 14th generation processors, the Core i9-13900K and the 14900K specifically, randomly crashing in games. Not just crashing occasionally, it's crashing constantly where people were playing Unreal Engine games, compiling shaders, and their system would just buckle under load. Blue screens, corruption errors, total instability. And here's where it gets worse. This wasn't just gamers with overclocked systems pushing things too hard. Game servers running these processors in controlled professional environments with server-grade motherboards designed for stability were experiencing the same issues. We're talking about dedicated hosting providers seeing crash rates through roughly 50% on their Raptor Lake servers. Some server operators started changing extra support fees specifically for systems with these Intel chips because they required so much goddamn troubleshooting. And Intel spent months investigating while processors were failing left and right. They issued workarounds, they blamed motherboard manufacturers for aggressive power settings, they released microcode updates that were supposed to fix things, but really just put band-aids on a gaping wound. It wasn't until July of 2024 that Intel finally admitted they found the root cause. A microcode bug that was telling the processors to run at a voltage that were quite literally degrading the silicon over time. The chips were killing themselves. And the fix? It prevents new processors from degrading, sure, but if your chip was already damaged, well, tough shit, it's done, dead. You need a new RMA and hope that Intel honors the warranty, which they eventually extended by 2 years because of the sheer volume of failures. Some reports suggested return rates for these processors were 4 times higher than the previous generation. So yeah, it wasn't a bug, it was a defect. Meanwhile, while Intel was busy managing a crisis that felt like it was ripped from a corporate nightmare scenario, AMD was just quietly winning. They launched the Ryzen 7000 series, then their 9000 series, and while their 9000 series wasn't the massive gaming leap everyone hoped for at first, it didn't need to be, because AMD had already done something Intel could match. They figured out gaming. The secret weapon is AMD's 3D V-Cache technology, which sounds like a marketing nonsense until you see what it actually does. AMD takes their already solid Ryzen processors and stack an additional layer of cache memory directly on top of the CPU. More cache means the processor can store more data close to where it's needed, which means it doesn't have to constantly reach out to slower system memory to grab information. In gaming, when you're rapidly loading textures, assets, and game logic, that extra cache is very transformative. That's why the Ryzen 7 7800X3D became a legend because of this. It's an 8-core processor with lower clock speeds than Intel's flagship chips, but it absolutely destroys in gaming. We're talking about a processor that constantly matches or beats Intel's Core i9 chips, which cost hundreds of dollars more. And it does it while it's running cooler and pulling less power. That's not just a win, that's embarrassing for Intel. AMD didn't stop there. They've got the Ryzen 7 9800X3D now, which improved the design even further by flipping the cache layer underneath the cores instead of on top. This lets the processor run cooler and the clock higher while still delivering that massive cache advantage. The result is a chip that dominates in gaming, and AMD has been very open about the fact that their standard Ryzen 9000 processors won't beat their previous generation X3D chips in games. They're basically telling you to wait for the X3D models if gaming is what you care about. And people listened. The AMD Ryzen 7 7800X3D and its successors have become the default recommendation for gaming builds, not the budget option, the default. Because Intel has nothing that competes with it in FPS per dollar. You'd think Intel would respond with something aggressive. A new architecture, a killer feature, something to claw back that mindshare, but instead, they released Arrow Lake in late 2024 and it was a mess. Arrow Lake, officially called the Core Ultra 200S series, was supposed to be Intel's big comeback. New architecture, massive efficiency improvements, lower power consumption, and to be fair, they delivered on efficiency. These chips draw significantly less power than the Raptor Lake series, which is great if you live somewhere with brutal summers or expensive electricity. But here's the problem. They're slower in games. Not marginally slower, noticeably slower. In some cases, Intel's new flagship Core i9 285K loses to Intel's own previous generation chips, which you can buy for less money on the used market. Intel admitted that their launch numbers were off up to 30% because of BIOS issues, Windows scheduler problems, and other technical f***ups that should have been caught before launch. They promised fixes and some have rolled out, but the damage was done. Review my Filipino accent. Reviewers tested the chips at launch and found them underwhelming. And that first impression sticks. People building PCs today aren't going to gamble on Intel promising that things will get better eventually. So they'll just buy AMD instead. The new Arrow Lake CPUs also required a new motherboard with the LGA 1851 socket, which means you're dropping extra cash on a platform that history suggests Intel will likely abandon in a generation or two. AMD, meanwhile, has been using the AM5 socket since the Ryzen 7000 series launched, and they've committed to supporting it through multiple generations. You can buy a motherboard now and upgrade your processor down the line without replacing everything. That's not just good value, that's respect for your customers. But even after that, Intel is still the market leader in total sales. Sure, they've got contracts with OEM, enterprise customers, and a massive installed base. But in the PC master race, where the people who build PCs are the ones who cares about getting the best performance for their dollar, Intel is losing, not slowly but massively. The ratio has gone from Intel outselling AMD 9-1 just a few years ago to Intel only outselling AMD by around 9% in desktop today. That's a staggering shift and it's accelerating. AMD's revenue share in desktop is growing even faster than their unit share, which means they're selling more high-end, high-margin chips. Intel, meanwhile, is stuck managing the fallout from the Raptor Lake, trying to salvage Arrow Lake's reputation and watching their gaming dominance evaporate. The f***? That's a bar, no cap. What's wild is that Intel did this to themselves. AMD didn't beat Intel by investing some revolutionary technology that Intel can replicate. They beat Intel by being consistent, delivering value, and not shipping processors that degrade over time. The bar was not high, and Intel tripped over it anyway. So if you're building a new gaming PC today, you're probably buying AMD. The 7800X3D or the 9800X3Ds are the best gaming processors you can buy at their price points. And Intel has nothing that competes. But for productivity, it's more of a toss-up. Intel's chip still performs well in multi-threaded workloads, and if you're doing heavy rendering or scientific computing, there are Intel options we're considering. But the average person building a gaming rig or mixed-use stations, AMD is just the smarter choice. Better gaming performance, lower power consumption, and a platform that won't be obsolete in 2 years. Does this mean Intel is doomed? Well, no. They're still a massive company with resources AMD can't match yet, but they've lost something more valuable than a market share. They've lost trust. When you ship processors that break themselves, when you launch a new generation that's slower than the old one, when you keep changing sockets and forcing people to buy new motherboards or recycle, people stop giving you the benefit of the doubt. I mean, yes, I guess Intel can recover, but they'll need to do it in a hard way by shipping genuinely great products, consistent for multiple generations. No shortcuts, no excuses, just good processor at a price that doesn't self-destruct. Until then, AMD's the default and Intel is the gamble. And that's the reversal nobody saw coming 5 years ago, but here we are. And because you made it here, can you also hit that like button and subscribe to the channel? Please, do it and be a good boy. Also, did you know the PC market is absolutely well, if you want to know more about it, then click here, or click the video on the left to watch it. And yeah, that's all about it. See ya.